Everyone, to our Gabayot. We're going to have a brief discussion, but we're not going to be doing it on the Parsha today. Rather, we're going to be looking at the quotes that I assembled for us to ponder as we begin this 5783. Okay. For those of you who are watching via YouTube and joining us and davening with us via live stream, there should have been something to click for this particular handout that says Jewish quotes to ponder as we begin the new year. This week, we're only going to look at the first page. I say that because so that way that all of you will feel that I'm not supposed to listen to the rabbi, and I'm going to turn to the second page, Dafka. But I'd like us to focus on the first page, if we might, today. And what I'd like us to do is I'm just going to read each quote very, not quickly, but to give us time to ponder them. And then I'd like you to share which quote, for as we approach this new year and that we just began, and we go towards just finishing Yom Kippur, just heading towards Sukkot, and the rest of the year, which quote is hitting you, resonating with you, which is touching your heart, and why that might be, what it means to you, the quote. So that is what we're going to do this morning. The first quote, Rabbi Eugene Borowitz. To be a Jew means the ability to think of our problems in the context of Jewish suffering and of our goals in the framework of human destiny. Second quote, Rabbi Stephen S. Wise. Vision looks inward and becomes duty. Vision looks outward and becomes aspiration. Vision looks upward and becomes faith. Third, from Rabbi Eugene Cohn, to say that God is personal does not necessarily mean that God is a person. Many things that are not persons are personal. Love, honor, friendship, loyalty. None of these ideals is impersonal. They have meaning only as they are manifest in personality. In the same sense, God is personal. God is indeed the very source and sponsor of human personality. Quote 4 from Rabbi Leo Beck. So many people go through life filling the storeroom of their minds with odds and ends of a grudge here, a jealousy there, a pettiness, a selfishness, all ignoble. The true task of each person is to create a noble memory, a mind filled with grandeur, forgiveness, restless ideals, and the dynamic ethical ferment preached by all religions at their best. Number 5, Rabbi Shaul Lieberman. Judaism is a continuing conversation between the generations. Number 6, from Rabbi Morris Adler. Our prayers are answered not when we are given what we ask, but when we are challenged to be what we can be. Number 7, Rabbi Abraham Geiger. How to live, draw from the past, live in the present, work for the future. Number 8, Rabbi Joseph Lookstein. Judaism emphasizes reason, not blind faith. It stresses understanding, not intellectual surrender. Knowledge and inquiry, and not helpless submission. No, for Judaism at least, tradition is not a voice from the dead which commands, obey me. It is rather the thrilling call of living experience which says, use me. If you are at home via our YouTube, I invite you all to be using the chat box to put in which quotes touched you, moved you, and why, and to have a conversation with each other. But now I'm going to invite those who are present to tell me which quote, one, touched you particularly this morning. Brenda?
4.
Number 4 from Rabbi Beck. Why is that?
The whole budget.
That's really good. Yeah, so thank you. So Rabbi Beck tells that we do sometimes hold in our minds grudges and jealousies and pettinesses. And I love that he calls it a storehouse, right? Sometimes we don't even know what's in the kitchen pantry, what's in the back there, right? What's that can? What is that box? Whatever. Sometimes we're not even aware that we're particularly coming into the room and we might have a little bit of a grudge or a jealousy or a pettiness that we're still holding on to unawares that affect our interaction with a person or in the community. So thank you, Brenda.
And it takes a lot of work to put that try act generously. Putting memories, good memories of when
Yeah, should be an expiration date on the cans in the storeroom that are labeled grudges and jealousy and pettinesses. And it's good to clean out our storeroom of those cans that have expired. And if we open up, they contain rancidness in them. And also storerooms accumulate a lot of dust that even covers up the rancidness of the cans. So it's very good. We need to make sure the cans are dated properly with the cans of goodness and kindness, and to let those be the only things in the storeroom. So thank you, Brenda. Josh, you have a hand up. You have a quote that touched you?
I actually, if it's all right, would like to build on number 4 a little
Oh,
bit.
go for it. Go for it. I like Rabbi Beck.
I think storeroom is being, in some ways, overgenerous.
Okay.
It's more like a toxic waste dump. Because in a storeroom,
I like how you look at me when you say that. I'm just teasing.
With cans, even if the contents are rancid, that doesn't affect the other cans. If you have cans with rancid food and cans with good food, the good food isn't affected. You can still take the good food. But with grudges, jealousy, pettiness, selfishness, they don't just spoil themselves and take up space.
Mm-hmm.
They infect, they degrade, they toxicify, they poison everything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not just that you're storing it. It's not just taking up space. We live in California. Space is expensive. It's making the good stuff unlivable and unusable on top of it.
Yeah. It's hard to actually even find the good stuff sometimes because so many of the cans are so rancid. You have to even look for it. And when you do, you have to really work hard to pull out some piece of goodness, dust it off, and use it.
Even if it's even still good.
If it's even still good, right? So it's really, but if you cleared out all the pettinesses and jealousy by the end of Yom Kippur, before the gates of Ne'ilah shut closed, then hopefully all that's left in your storeroom are cans that are dated for this coming year that are marked goodness and kindness and altruism and things like that. So thank you. I appreciate the fact that it can affect everything. The jealousies and pettinesses that we hold can affect, even when we're trying to do something good, it can affect it and not make it as good as it could be. So I appreciate that point. Thank you. Yes, Phil, you have a quote. Number 5.
Number 5. I feel it's really important that many people that I contact with that are Jews, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been to shul since I was bar mitzvah. That's the thing. It's important to pass it. Otherwise, we're going to lose our religion.
Mm-hmm.
We need to pass this on to one generation. Everything that we stand for. Otherwise, we're going to annihilate ourselves.
Yeah. So thank you, Phil. Rabbi Lieberman, Judaism is continuing conversation between the generations. I consciously wanted to pick not only quotes that speak to our generic humanity, like Rabbi Beck's, that are really personally good, but I wanted something that was really about Judaism and Jewish people as a whole, because sometimes we've come to a place where Judaism has been reduced to tikkun atzmi. It can help us in personally uplift ourselves, but we sometimes forget that Judaism is not only about me, myself, and I, and how good I can manage the world, as important as that is. I don't mean to demean it, but part of it is how we have certain traditions that are very precious that help us in our mission with ourselves, but we also have a people to which are connected and should feel committed, and we have traditions that we should be keeping as part of that covenant that we have and that heritage that's been passed down to us. Otherwise, there isn't much difference between Judaism and pop psychology if you denude it of its Judaism and Jewishness. Yeah, so I appreciate your saying that. Yes. Lois, do you have a quote that you'd like that touched you this morning? Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. And that quote really is reminds me of you from what I know of you, and Sandy of blessed memory as well. How you have all lived and behaved. So I'm not surprised that speaks to you. It really is like your ethos, and I really, really appreciate that model. And I think it works that quote works in tandem with your quote in a way, because part of drawing from the past can be from our parents, from our teachers and mentors and grandparents along the way. But part of our drawing from the past can be from that continuing conversation between the generations that you mentioned, right? And hearing what God and what our people have passed down to us in the conversations that can help enliven us and enrich us and speak to our moment as well. So I appreciate that. Is there anyone who hasn't chosen a quote? Just Ruthie.
I'm guilty of everything. Life is so delicate. Situation. We're always in different chapters in our life. At each our challenge.
Yes. And I really appreciate you holding up Rabbi Adler's quote. It is actually on our website, on our prayer page, on our services page on the website. This is one of the 2 or 3 quotes there. And I like it a lot because, a child's view, we teach children, you pray to God and you'll get something for it, right? But that's really not a very healthy view. Number one, because it's not true. If I pray for the winning lottery ticket and go buy the winning lottery ticket, the chances of that being the winning lottery ticket are really, really low. And in fact, I've never really had the kind of winning ticket that I was praying for, right? So, right? That's number one. But number two, the word to pray does not mean to ask for something. The root of tefillah, lahit palel, is pei lamed lamed, which means to evaluate. And lahit palel, to pray, literally means to evaluate oneself. So when we pray, we actually, it is actually more true to the Hebrew word pray, not the English Christian word prayer, but the Jewish Hebrew word pray is to evaluate oneself. So it should be a challenge for us to be better, to do better, to become better, to aspire to more in our character, to raise our honorability quotient. Yes, you have a second quote?
No, sorry if I keep building off of other people.
No. But Rabbi Shaul Lieberman said a conversation between the generations. We're having a conversation just with this generation.
So our prayers, for quote number 6, our prayers are answered not only. That very strongly ties into what we were discussing on Yom, where it's about the direction you're going. You said in the discussion, when is somebody at the 8th rung lower than somebody on the 4th rung, when the person on the 4th rung just went up from the 3rd and the person on the from the 9th, or whatever the exact wording was. And I think this ties into that where it is about the direction you're going. It's not just, where you are right now.
Yeah, I love that. So thank you for reminding us of that teaching, that Hasidic teaching that we spoke about on Yom Kippur, and bringing that in. I'd also like to say sometimes when we ask for something that's sort of surface deep, we don't realize that we're probably asking for something much deeper below. Stephen always says to me, what's the story behind the story, right? So if I were to ask for X, sometimes I need to ask, what am I really asking for? What is my real need underneath it, right? Sometimes there's a lot more going on than just the simple wording of I need or I want, right?
Do you want the winning lottery ticket, or do you want peace and stability for your family?
That's correct. That's right. So when somebody prays for a lottery ticket, that they don't really want the lottery ticket. They want peace. They want stability. They want security. They want, they don't want to always have to be frenetic about if they're going to put food on their table for their family. So some of the more basic things underneath we often miss because of the headline or that surface thing that somebody says to us or that we say. So thank you. Anybody else have a quote that they wanted to hold up? Yes.
Well, I go back and forth between number 3 and number 8. 3 because I feel like I'm in my relationship with.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what is this God then that I'm developing a new?
Yeah.
And then also number 8 rather, just this idea of the constant. I think it goes with Phil's quote about continuing conversation between the generations to sharing our knowledge.
Yeah. So I love that you highlighted both of those, Jason. And you pointed out a couple of really great things. One is that when it comes to God, we probably were brought up with very surface notions that were maybe appropriate for our parents to tell us when we're 4 years old and 5 years old. Our brains at 4 years old can't take on, lots of nuance and contradiction and all kinds of things, right? They have to be very specific and sort of graphic. So teaching a child some sort of vague thing about a parent or a being in the sky who protects us and to whom we can ask for something makes sense for 4 years old. But what makes sense for a 4-year-old does not make sense for a 40-year-old, right? And as we get older, we're allowed to have more mature conceptions of things like God and freedom and hope and all kinds of things, right? So I think that renegotiating what our feelings are about God is really a powerful thing. Again, we might ask below the surface, what is that? What is it? The God that we want to pray to, what is it we expect or don't expect? What is it we need and don't need? So I appreciate your willingness to hold up Rabbi Cohn's quote. I think that very often we try to do Judaism without God talk because it makes us uncomfortable sometimes to talk about God publicly. It feels like that's what Christians do sometimes because certain groups of Christians mention God like every other sentence or more. And bless them, right? I'm not suggesting there's anything necessarily wrong about that, but there's a comfort level in some Christian communities that we modern Jews in America at least don't seem to have, right? And maybe in some very Orthodox communities, they can throw in a Baruch Hashem every other sentence or so, but we moderns don't do that very much, and it makes us very uncomfortable. And we should be a lot more comfortable with God talk than we are. So thank you for holding that up. I'd also like to say that you're also pointing to number 8, that Number one thing that's very different from stereotypical American notions of faith is that Judaism treasures doubt and treasures questions. And you can get to a deeper place and a better place and a more mature place by holding your doubts and asking questions, right? And so that you can get to something deeper. If you never ask a question and you never challenge yourself or the status quo or conventional wisdom, how do you get to something deeper if you don't do that? So I appreciate that piece as well. And I want to tie it to your quote, Phil, because I also think the other thing that's very specifically Jewish, right? Typical stereotypical notions of faith are you should believe everything, trust everything, and never question. And Judaism almost says the opposite. You should always be questioning. But the other thing about Judaism that I think is important that your quote number 5 holds up, and that is also part of this, is that Judaism, more so than most other religions, is about community and not just about my own personal relationship with God. No one's against personal relationships with God in Judaism. That no one's saying that's a bad thing. But Judaism very much about community and how I am part of a larger thing, which is also very empowering for us, and we can accomplish a lot more when we're working in concert. Take a couple more things, and then we have a little bit more davening to do. Josh, and then Brenda.
So to riff once again on something you said, with the contradictions and the idea of freedom, I found, since meeting Esther, marrying Esther in sermon, the laws are free. Like, as contradictory as that may seem, and as counter to what the prevailing American culture might say, I found that keeping the laws more assiduously, following the Torah, has been liberating. It's not, the laws don't bind you, they uplift you. And I think that goes very much. It's not about blind faith, because in order to follow the laws, you have to analyze the laws, understand the laws. You have to want to do and follow the laws. There's no police that are going to come and stop you for religious laws.
Mm-hmm.
So
I really appreciate that perspective on law, on how law is very necessary. I think most of us would not want a country that didn't have a law. I don't think most of us would want a country that didn't have stoplights and stop signs, and to say that impedes on my freedom, that you have these horrible stoplights and stop signs that restrict my ability to drive any way I want and whatever speed I want, etc. Right? Sometimes law is very helpful and necessary. I'm not really a libertarian who wants almost no laws, right? That's really, the less laws, the better. I don't think that's necessarily true. I also think that I was once, when I was working at a summer camp, and I was with the Rosh Machaneh, the head of camp. His name is Alvin Mars, a great educator. He challenged me to think about, like, sometimes having you can't be creative and very effective when you don't actually have a boundary within which to work. So if I say to write a poem, that is not as helpful to you if I said, if you could write a haiku and have the theme be freedom, but do what you want with it, that actually can be very helpful to somebody's creative spirits, because now they have enough direction, enough law, if you will, that they know what a haiku is. It's not a sonnet, right? And there's still a million things you can do. No two people are going to write the same haiku exactly the same, from that kind of giving a little bit of helpful direction that touches your creative.
But it removes choice paralysis.
I didn't hear.
It removes a lot of the choice paralysis. If you have too many options, you can't decide.
Yeah, the choice paralysis. Thank you for that phrase. I love that. Yes. Brenda was next, and then Phil. Brenda?
On the 7th,
Yes.
on the date. It's been a long time.
Yes.
And how it's true, because I have to draw.
Yes. Drawing from the past is different than imitating the past,
Right.
right? Or repeating the past. Drawing from the past means you have to be thoughtful. You actually do have to analyze and be thoughtful about what you're drawing from. So I think that that's in consonance with things that other people said. Thank you.
And then, yes, and that's why it's called.
Yeah.
And the present,
It-
and then we can work on what we do, work on what we do, follow what we do, and to initiate our forward.
Yeah, living in the present can be very hard because very often we want to be thinking about what's next and what do I need to do and where I need to be and where do I need to go and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes we carry so many thoughts about other things that it's hard for us to actually be present for a moment and to turn off the other stuff just to allow us to be. So I appreciate your emphasis on that as well. And of course, working for the future, if just, to work for the future, you have to have a vision. You have to have a mission, right? For yourself, for your family, for your congregation, right? If you don't have a mission, it's hard to work for a future if you don't have any right vision or mission. Did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted,
Last comment, then we're going to have to go down.
just wanted to say that the one thing I do love about you, that we can,
Mm-hmm.
and that we live by the commandments.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yes, that's from.
Just like if what you have taught, you cannot stand up, it's okay. You don't have, it's more about your health and your well-being
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as well as when we can't act, we should act.
Mm-hmm.
But not all, I don't believe all religions say, some religions say it's this way, or the doorway.
Well, thank you. Well, it makes sense that if you harbor doubt and you're allowed to question, that you're going to actually have the results of that doubting and questioning affect how you live, right? So when you have a law that says like fast and Yom Kippur, if you have a doubt about your ability to do that because of health and what the doctor told you, then obviously the consequence is that law doesn't apply to you this year. Or the law for you is take your medication with whatever food and drink you need, but otherwise fast, right? Like you have to be very sensible and reasonable. You can't just live in a mystical vacuum and say all the laws as written way back when for another group of people and another culture and another time and a place, I'm going to follow jot and tittle thoughtlessly. That has never been Judaism, as far as I can tell. And the few groups that tried to do that, the Hasidei Ashkenaz, the Essenes, etc., are not around anymore, right? Because they were so over punctilious and over literal and hyper literal with laws and customs in the past, rather than drawing from the past and being thoughtful. It's easy to be thoughtless. It's easy to read a code and find an answer and do whatever it says, or go to a rabbi, ask him a question, and by darn it, rabbi must be co-equal to God in some way or channeling God, and therefore I'm going to do exactly what he or she says word for word. It's very easy actually to live a life like that, but it's not healthy. It's healthier to get advice, perhaps from the past and from rabbis and from other people in your life, but to be thoughtful about how, if that's the right kind of advice for you, and to what degree that advice resonates in your heart. Judaism doesn't let us off the hook of being our own monitor of our own hearts and our own souls and our own lives. So we have to filter the past and the wisdom for it to be our wisdom. It isn't our wisdom merely by mimicking it. It becomes our wisdom where we're thoughtful. Thank you all for a very robust discussion. I really loved it, and I could go on forever. We'll probably try to save these, and we'll use the other side that I know you didn't peek at for another week. So we're going to continue. Meanwhile, we do have a little bit of davening to do, and I'd like us to do a very quick musaf. We're on page 150.